Morning guys, welcome to our latest video. It's Sunday morning towards the end of October, just about to enter the half-term break. I've got a few days off, which is a pleasant relief. It's been a really busy year, and this is sort of first decent bunch of holiday I've got, and taking the opportunity to play a game. And I realised that despite me doing a showcase of some of my new figures a couple of months ago, we haven't seen my Swiss in action. So here they are on the table, my new Swiss battalion to add to my French forces. So I thought it was appropriate, given my emphasis on 1815, to do a small scenario around an assault by, I think it's Hubert's 10th Division, against the village of Saint-Armand at Ligny. Now this is a smaller subset of some of the Ligny scenarios I've played before, and the French are assaulting this village. They've got 12 turns to do it. They've got 2 brigades in the 10th Division. First one's got 6 line battalions. They'll all be fighting as regulars. And then the second brigade has a further 6 battalions. There's a regiment of 2 down here on the right, a regiment of 3 in the centre, and then the Swiss were attached to them as well. So again, also 6 battalions in this brigade. And they're supported by the divisional artillery and the corps artillery battery. So a 12-pounder battery and a 6-pounder battery there, overlooking Saint-Armand. Now facing off against them initially are some elements of the 1st Brigade of the 1st Corps of the Prussian Army. So we've got 3 regiments of regulars in here, and they will receive some reinforcements from the 3rd Brigade. So we've got some of those on the table, and another 2 battalions in reserve. They are the Berg Infantry, I think they were the 29th Regiment. And we've got a couple of heavy Prussian batteries, in reality deployed further back, but I'll put them on the table there to remind me to fire them. So let's see how we go. Pretty small game here, just a divisional size action really. So another one to test the General d'Armée rules on a small game. Hope you enjoyed this one. Hopefully the sound is better. I think I might have been continuing to discern what the problem is, which is wearing tops with collars, which basically rubs against the microphone. So I think that was again the problem in the last game. Hope it didn't ruin your enjoyment too much, and we'll see how this one goes when I do the editing of this one. But not that you need to know my attire, but just wearing a t-shirt today. So hopefully that will solve the problem, and you'll be able to have a good volume on this one and no interference and crackling noises as the microphone rubs against the material of my top. Anyway, hopefully solution achieved. All right, let's crack on with this game. I think we probably will do 2 turns of pre-game bombardment at long range from the relevant artillery batteries to represent the approach marches as the French move up into range. So we'll do that first, and then we'll start with turn 1 proper. Okay, so we've done our pre-game firing, and we suffered a couple of casualties on the Swiss, and 1 casualty on this battalion here from the Prussian artillery firing at long range from the edge of the table over there. And similarly, one of the Berg battalions took 4 casualties, no less, from French long-range artillery fire from this battery, whereas the battery that was firing into the village has had no effect. So the Prussian deployments on the hillside behind Saint-Armand, as in the real battle, suffering from heavy French artillery fire, and the French at the moment slightly winning the artillery duel with their superior elevated positions, which gives them an advantage at shooting the approaching Prussian forces. All right, I'm going to give both sides 3 ADCs. They should only have 2 because there are only 2 brigades on each side. But just to give us a bit more flexible tactical deployment, I discover, I think in these small games, a slightly more generous ADC allocation goes a long way. So both sides are going to have 3 ADCs, so no advantage. And how have we done? Both sides have activated all of their ADCs. So we'll do allocations, and then I'll be back and roll for initiative. Okay, so with both sides with full ADC allocations, they went for the fairly obvious choices, I guess. So the Prussians went for artillery assault on their heavy batteries, try and whittle down the French attack before it goes in. The French have put infantry assault on their brigade on the left. Both of those had rerolls, which came off, but all other units also activated. So all brigades are active this turn. Let's roll for initiative. And what have we got? Well, that was a pretty dire first row, 2 cocked dice, so we'll just roll those 2 again. All right, so the Prussians have got 6 and the French have got 5. Prussians have got initiative. They will start with charges first. Don't think there are any of those. Then movement in turn 1. All right, down here on the left flank, the French skirmish screen has moved up towards the village of Saint-Armand, and the French battalions of the left-hand brigade have moved up, potentially to be in a position to assault the village next turn. On the right, the other brigade is now moving forward to the farmland in between the village of Armand and Armand-la-Haye, which I think is just the other side down here to the right. Actually, I think that's away down to the left. That's right, this one is the flank of the French position, and this river goes off across there to the right and then to the north towards Ligny. So this is a gap in the by the flank of the village that the French here are trying to exploit. All right, that's the end of French movement, and again these flanking units just on the wrong side of the river at the moment will be looking to move across and support this assault against the Prussian positions in due course. All right, Prussians to open fire first. I think we'll get some defensive fire from the garrisons and the village, the Prussian skirmishers, and then I'll come back with their artillery. Okay, so some good skirmish and garrison fire from the Prussians there. We've knocked out one of the bases of that French skirmisher screen on the left, and this French skirmisher screen here has also taken 2 casualties. Now the Prussian artillery is going to open fire. They're going to be targeting the foremost battalion here, the Swiss, and this battalion they fired at last time. So they do have artillery assault, so they will 2 extra dice, but it is at extreme range, so they won't get a bonus for the French being in column at this range. They roll a 6, which at long range I think is simply half a casualty. Let's just check that. Yeah, half a casualty, and 1 more for the casualty dice. So let's see if the half converts. It doesn't. That's 1 more casualty on the Swiss, and then firing at this other battalion down here. Prussians do a 7 at long range, again half a casualty, but they do get 2 bonus casualties this time, and the half converts. So that's 3 more casualties on this French unit, taking it up to 5 casualties. So they're starting to suffer from the fire of the Prussians. All right, let's do the French return fire. Okay, so the French skirmisher return fire was not particularly effective. Firing into garrisons, you lose 2 combat dice. So the skirmishers were 4 shots for that many bases, down to 2. They didn't do anything, and the French skirmishers here didn't do anything. The 2 artillery batteries both switched priority and started softening up Saint-Armand before the French infantry assault goes in. And they were successful at causing no casualties, but a discipline test on the garrison, which they have failed. So the Fusiliers on the right-hand side of that village have gone unformed. They are veterans for the Prussians. The other 2 units are line, so got a reasonable chance of standing, but we'll see what happens as we move on to turn 2, and we roll for initiative. Sorry, roll for ADCs first. Okay, so the Prussians got 3 ADCs, and they used 2 of those to release their reserves, so the Berg infantry are now able to move, and they used their final one to do a reroll on the garrison of the village, which worked. They should have done the reroll on their artillery battery because they forgot they're firing at long range, so if they're hesitant they can't fire, and indeed they have failed their roll. So the Prussian artillery, if they remain at long range, will not be able to fire this turn. For the French, we only have 1 ADC, but both brigades activated, and then for their artillery battery, that is also active. All right, so this will be at -1 for the Prussians, as they have 1 hesitant unit. But the French roll double 1, so the Prussians will get to go first. It'll be charges before anything else. I think actually the first to charge will be the French. Let's see what they do. All right, the French have declared charges. So this brigade on the far left hand of the French has declared a charge, and they've gone into this part of Saint-Armand village. They have 2 supports. Now you'll only be able to use those on subsequent turns, but they've gone in. And against the French, again the French here have charged in against the veteran Fusiliers of the Prussians. We do have, I don't know whether you can see them in the front line there, a unit of engineers, a company of engineers attacking that battalion. So I use the house rule, as you know, to add +1 when you have your engineers attached. So the divisional engineers have gone into that attack in St. Armand. So that's it for charges. We will have some defensive fire to do, but assaulting buildings, charges automatically go home. So we'll just do that defensive fire, and then we'll start normal Prussian movement. Okay, so the rest of the movement is complete in turn 2. And as you can see, there's a flanking movement going on here. So on the French side of the Ligny Brook, the French here are moving forward and are taking advantage of incurring extra casualties to move swiftly through rugged terrain. So they've started to try and wide out flanking movement of those Prussian defensive batteries. As we move across, the rest of this brigade has continued its advance, and it's now pushing forward some of its battalions from the second line. These ones haven't taken any casualties yet, and they will now start drawing some fire from the Prussian artillery, being the closest threat. And by doing this rotation in place, we'll avoid any of our first wave getting too badly damaged before they get a chance to assault. Well, that at least is the plan. Otherwise, in the village, as you've seen, the French have gone in, and the Prussians have moved the Berg infantry now up, so it's in direct support. 2 battalions are in direct support of this cluster of buildings on the right of the village, so that'll be a closely contested combat. All right, that's it for movement. First, it will be Prussian firing in turn 2. Okay, so pretty light casualties from the firing. The Prussian artillery caused a casualty against this battalion in the centre, and this battalion now approaching them on the right-hand side. The French have done a bit better. They've caused 3 casualties and a discipline test on the Prussian, the Berg infantry that are in support of the village. So let's roll a discipline test. It's at -1. That's a 7, which will go down to a 6. So the Berg infantry are unformed. That's the end of firing, and let's crack on with the exciting bit of the turn as the French try and have their first go at capturing these villages. All right, the first combat down here is quite straightforward. French start with 5 dice, as do the Prussians. The French lose 1 for attacking a built-up area. That's the only modifier. Let's see how we go. French cause 2 casualties, and the Prussians cause 2. Right, that means combat is drawn, and we will go on to a second round as further troops pile into the village. All right, I almost invariably fight to the bitter end in these, but actually the Prussians have decided to withdraw. They've pulled back into this second built-up area behind the first. As the French has drawn that combat, you get the option to retire if you're the defender, and the French would have been able to bring in these 2 battalions that were previously in support distance of the battalion that was attacking the village. So they would have had 15 dice against the Prussian 4 or 5, so the Prussians would have been overwhelmed. So they've decided to pull back. They still hold the centre village. All right, and now let's do the combat here. So again, the Prussians would have had 5 dice. They lose 1 for being unformed as a result of that French artillery fire. The French would attack with 5 dice. They gain 1 for an engineer, takes them up to 6, but then they lose 1 for attacking a built-up area. So this time the French have the slight advantage. 5 dice to the Prussian 4. Let's see how we do. French do well again. French do 3 casualties. The Prussians do none. The French have captured this part of the village and ejected the Prussians. Okay, so this is going really well for the French. Some good dice rolls there. So they've captured the first of these 5 built-up areas and gone into the village there. They've captured this one as well and driven into the village here with the help of their engineers. The Berg infantry there are unformed. The musketeer fusilier battery there at the back. Actually, there should have been 1 extra dice for the Prussians because they were veterans. Let's roll that 5. So they only won by 2. That will still be enough. Let's just check that. Yeah, the losers still retreat on a 3 or a 2, but there is 1 more casualty, which I've just marked up on this French battalion here. So they're now on 2. But they're both retreating. The Berg are unformed, and indeed the ones who retired into this built-up area are also unformed. So the French attack is steamrolling at the moment. Let's see how we do as we move into turn 3. Okay, so unfortunately for the Prussians, they only rolled 1 ADC, sorry, they had 2 ADCs, but they committed both of those to bringing on their reserve, so they have released another brigade from reserve. However, and they're in off-table reserve, so they will appear on their table edge this turn. However, the other 2 Prussian brigades on table both went hesitant, so the retreating unit remains in retreat status. For the French, the impetus of driving into the village, unfortunately, also caused this left-hand brigade to go hesitant, as again all the French committed all their ADCs to getting infantry assault off on the right-hand brigade. So both now have infantry assault in place, but unfortunately for the French, their left-hand brigade with all the impetus is currently stalled this turn. It will be +1 for the French, which is a draw, because the French rolled a double 1, the Prussians rolled a 3. But the Prussians had initiative last turn, so they will then keep it in the case of a draw. So the Prussians get initiative and charges first, then normal movement in turn 3. Okay, so we've got a charge result to do in the centre. So we'll kick that off. Firstly, we'll get a defensive volley by the Berg infantry. They are in column, so this will be at half effect. And they will be counting as conscripts, because I think they've taken 5 casualties. So let's see how they do. So that's a 7. For an inferior volley, it's 1 casualty, and as they're in column, that's halved, so that has no effect. So the charge continues. Let's have a look at the charge modifiers for the French and for the Prussians here. Right, back in a second. Okay, so it's a +4 modifier for the French. The Prussians decided not to commit their commander. He's with that battalion in the centre. I think he thinks on a +4 this is a bit of a lost cause for the Berg, and he doesn't want to lose his commander. For the French, we also have not committed our commander because we need to stay in command with our flanking force over here. So both sides have not committed their commanders. So let's do the roll-off. Let's see how we do. +4 to the French. French roll a 10, Prussians roll a 10. So the French win by 4. So on a result of +4, the attackers take the ground and the Berg retreat off table and take 1 more casualty. Now they can form up behind any formed units, but I don't think they can form up behind their own retreating units, so there's nothing for them to fall back behind, so the Berg are gone. Okay, so turn 3 unit movement. With most units in the village being hesitant this turn, they've taken the opportunity to consolidate their positions to form up and be ready for attacks next turn. So the French and the Prussians have formed up in the opposing built-up areas here, and the French have now formed up here. Over on here you can see the Swiss are advanced and threatening the back of the Prussian position. The Berg infantry have formed column and done an about face, so there's a possibility of a counter-charge by them. Otherwise the rest of the French units have moved forward here. We do need to move on our Prussian reserves, which I'll do in a second, and the French outflanking force continues to make progress through the woods on the right. All right, I'll just deploy the last Prussian reserves and then we'll do firing. Okay, so movement and firing complete for turn 2. So some exchanges between the garrisons and the musketeers here, but no major effect. The French artillery has opened fire against the Westphalian Landwehr, so that's a surprise. When you last saw a shot, you had the Prussian artillery batteries there. They performed an emergency limber and have pulled back, being under threat from the French columns next turn. And the Westphalian Landwehr, the last reserve of the Prussians, has moved forward to take their place. The Prussian artillery will take another move to redeploy, and then we'll be able to unlimber the turn after, and then fire with full effect the turn after that. So we'll see how they go with that. Otherwise, these skirmishers again down here fired, but no major effect. So that's it. That's the end of turn 3. Let's move on with ADCs for turn 4. All right, plenty of charging in turn 4. The Berg infantry have charged against the Swiss across the river. At the same time, the same French brigade has itself charged the Westphalian Landwehr that have tried to arrive on the table to drive them away from reinforcing this position. In the centre, the French have realised there is nothing to charge, as the Berg did not occupy that building, but instead chose to attack that battalion. so they will be able to move up into that building in the normal movement phase. But they have charged here against the central built-up area and here against the left-hand built-up area. So plenty of charges to do. We'll start from left to right. So first, some defensive fire from the Prussian garrison as the French charge in, and that has no effect. So the French go in against the attack there. Now the fire from this next Prussian garrison, again, a 1, a 3 and a 4, so no effect. So the French go in against them. Right, a defensive French volley here against the Berg infantry. They roll an 8. They are in column, but they are veterans, so that will be 1 casualty and a discipline test on the Berg. That's rounding down. The Berg roll a 1, and that Berg battalion has taken no casualties. Sorry, roll a 7, and that Berg battalion had taken no casualties prior to that one. So they, I think, are okay and will continue with the charge. I think I'm wrong. They had taken 1 casualty. That takes them up to 2, but again, still no impact, and that charge will go in. All right, so let's have a look at the modifiers. So the Berg are reservists, but will count as regulars as they've only taken 2 casualties, so no effect for that. But the French get a +1 for being veterans. The French will not deploy their commander on this because he's supporting the attack here on the right, and again needs to have a command range to keep all his units in command. But the Berg will attach their brigadier, so they get a +1. And otherwise, I think they are the only modifiers, as neither side has substantial casualties. So let's roll this off. Effectively, it's a straight roll off. Oh, doesn't look good for the French. They've rolled only a 3. The Berg have rolled a 6. But the French do get a reroll as they have this unit here in support. So let's reroll the 1. We get a 5. So the Prussians, the Berg, have won by 1. On infantry versus infantry, the Berg infantry with melee with Elan, and the Swiss are caught by surprise by that charge and go unformed. Okay, and then our Landwehr gets to a volley. Again, they've only taken 2 casualties, so they count as line troops. So this will be a standard volley as those French charge in. They get a 6, and they are firing at a column, so they get an extra combat dice. No, that doesn't do anything. I should have probably been applying that as a modifier elsewhere. Apologies for not doing it. So they get a 6, which is a standard volley, is 1 casualty against the French, which will take them up to 3. So that'll be no modifiers on the charge result. Okay, let's do the charge result modifiers here. I think this one will be a straight roll-off, as neither side... Oh no, the French do have their commander engaged. The Westphalians will attach their commander as well, and both count as regulars for this combat, and not enough casualties to change the result. So let's see how we do. The French get a 9, the Prussians get a 5. The Prussians do not have infantry assault, but indeed it's the Prussians who are defending. So the Prussians can take a rear support and a flank support. So we will re-roll the 2 to start with. We get a 3, and then we'll re-roll a 3. We get a 5. So the Prussians are on an 8. Let's see what the French will do. So they have won by 1 already. They do have the opportunity of a support from their supporting battalion, but a win by 1 is enough to melee with Elan. That's good enough for the French. They will keep that result. The Prussians go unformed, and the French will melee with Elan. Okay, movement's complete on turn 4, and the French flanking force is now getting into position to assault and support its assault of its colleagues on the flank of the Westphalians, but it will have to cross the river before it can charge. Otherwise, as we move across the table, the French have taken advantage of the Prussian vacating these buildings to occupy this built-up area and this built-up area. Both those units are unformed as they've moved into them this turn. But that will be the movement. We'll start with firing for the Prussians. There won't be too much of that, as pretty much everything is engaged in combat. So we'll just see if there is any firing, and then I'll be back with combat. Right, so hand-to-hand combat now. The artillery didn't do much. The left-hand Westphalian regiment and the one behind it took some artillery fire casualties, a couple of casualties each, but that's it. All right, let's go with the assault here. As the French go into this building, again, they have a supporting battalion, but for the first round of combat, the Prussians have the advantage. Let's see how we do. Another pretty good roll for the French. They cause 3 casualties, as do the Prussians. That again is a draw, and that will trigger a second round of combat if the Prussians are up for it. But the French will have their supports they can throw in. Again, knowing it's early in the battle, the Prussians have decided not to be wiped out. They're already on 5 casualties. If they took 2 battalions of French, they would be in dire trouble. So they have pulled back, and the French now occupy the left-hand side of the village. Let's see how the attack here in the centre goes. Prussians have only got 1 casualty, the French have got none. So again, the Prussians should have the advantage on this one. 5 dice to 4. Let's see how we do. Again, the French have been remarkably lucky today. I don't think they've lost, in fact I know they haven't lost a single one of these roll-offs where they are at a disadvantage. But again, it's a draw, 2 casualties each, and the French get a second battalion that they can throw in. Again, I think the Prussians are forced to withdraw from the farm because they will just be wiped out if they fight 2 battalions to 1 in the second round. Now the combat for the Swiss should be better for the Prussians. They've got 6 dice to 4. Although the Swiss are veterans, the Prussians have the advantage of a land. The Swiss are unformed, and the Swiss have also taken 4 casualties. Yes, the Berg have driven the Swiss off. That's a win by 3. That will be a rout. The Swiss will flee back, and no, sorry, it's not a rout, it's a retreat. The Swiss will flee back, and the Berg get the opportunity to take the ground. Okay, so there's hope for the Prussians. That is indeed a rout result, and will be a falter test on this right-hand French brigade. The Swiss have been thrown back with heavy casualties. They're now on 8 casualties, and the Berg are potentially just outside the village and possibly able to do a counter-attack next turn. All right, let's see how this melee with the Landwehr goes off. So the Landwehr should start on 5 dice, as should the French. Let's just check their casualties. I'll be back in a sec. Okay, so there are no casualty penalties, but the French are attacking with Elan, and the Landwehr have been unformed. So the Landwehr cause 1 casualty, and the French cause 3. So at a victory of +2, the French take the ground, and that Landwehr battalion retreats off the table. Okay, well this could be a real swing, showing how important command dice are. So the French are really in a strong position here. Their right-hand brigade is pushing those Westphalian Landwehr off the table. They're outflanked, and the steam train is piling in. But because the Swiss have broken, the whole brigade has faltered, and the French only have 1 ADC. We rolled a 2 and a 1 as well. So only 1 ADC for the French, so no re-roll for this falter test. And if we get a savoir-keeper, that will be terrible news for the French there. Over across on this side, we will roll for activations. Let's see what we do. We'll roll for the French Infantry Brigade. It is active. The Prussians have got 3 brigades. Their artillery is now doing its second retire move, so will be not able to fire this turn. So no fire for the artillery, so we will just go for re-rolls. Starting with the Fusiliers, they're active. The Landwehr are hesitant, and then the Berg are active. So it'll be a -1 test, and now the critical falter test. Oh, it was nearly a 6. It bounced back to a 3. So I think that brigade will go hesitant. These are line troops, and they have to retire. So routing units disperse. So new unit syndrome. The Swiss have to disperse. They can't be reformed. All remaining units retire. All close order units lose 1 casualty. We lose 1 base. Artillery limbered unless they're more than 18 inches to the rear of the brigade, which, given where the front line is, I think they are. So we'll do that retire move, and the Landwehr get a second chance. Seeing their moment, the Berg infantry have decided to keep up the momentum of their attack. Having driven back the Swiss, they're now counter-attacking into this top right-hand part of St. Armand village. Otherwise, so there'll be a French defensive fire. As they're unformed, it'll only be 2 dice, and they don't cause any casualties. So that Berg infantry battalion will automatically charge in against those unformed French who have just occupied that building. Otherwise, in the rest of the village, the French have all formed up. This is now how the French formation looks. The units that spent all that time driving their way through the woods have had to fall back behind it, and we've decided we're not going to do another flanking march from the woods. It's going to take too long. They'll simply support the rest of this attack in the centre, which has all fallen back, and the Landwehr have formed up and moved forward slightly, and the Prussian regulars have formed up to potentially have a go at recapturing part of the village. All right, so we'll see if there's any other firing. The French artillery will again fire at long range against the Landwehr, I think, and there might be a bit of skirmish fire. We'll come back with the assaults and I'll let you know how the firing's gone. Okay, so the French artillery was pretty ineffective, caused no casualties against the Landwehr. However, the fire from the French skirmishers and the garrisons was pretty good, so the French skirmishers screen over here, which has moved back through the village, was able to inflict no less than 3 casualties on that Prussian brigade that's forming up outside the village, and the garrison in the centre caused another casualty. So quite a lot of casualties now against those Prussian regulars. Let's do the hand-to-hand combat. So the Berg infantry, let's just check their casualty status. I think they have taken a few, 3 casualties, and the French in that village have taken 2. I think that's their casualty counter. Okay, so no casualty modifiers. So the Prussians will start with 5, the French start with 5. The French get 1 for being an engineer or having their engineer attacked, and the Berg lose 1 for assaulting a built-up area. So the Berg do 1 casualty, and the French do 2. So on a combat against a built-up area, we do get the opportunity to fight on in the first round. Otherwise, the French get the opportunity to retire. I don't think they will do that. The French have supports, so they will have the opportunity to fight on. The Berg are in a different brigade to any of the troops around them, so they can't call on support. So I think the Berg will simply retire and allow the French to hold the village. Okay, so the Prussians put all their infantry onto re-rolls. Their artillery battery has now unlimbered on the hill, or is unlimbering this turn, so it'll only be able to fire at -2 this turn, or at full effect from next turn. The French only had 2 ADCs, and they took a risk, put the infantry assault back on this brigade, given it had a retire result. I think you have to reset the orders. So we did that, and that came off. So that's it. It'll be a straight roll-off. Everything is active. I think the Prussians had initiative last turn. And the Prussians get it again this turn. They will think about charges, and they will be opening fire with that artillery and taking a bit of a risk with it. Okay, so I hope I haven't lost any continuity. You've just had lunch, so that's just caused a bit of a delay. I think I was just completing movement. So the French battalion or brigade that was retiring has started to reposition itself now. The right-hand flanking units that were up there in those woods are now forming the right-hand flank of this attack, and the rest of the brigade is moving forward. Skirmish screens are going to be challenging one another in the centre there, and we did have that charge that Prussian regiment put in to try and get back into St. Armand. So from memory, I think the Prussians had initiative, so it'll be normal Prussian firing first. So again, these big French skirmish screens have been effective, so quite a few casualties put on the Landwehr there, and another 2 casualties put on that French column, Prussian column, which takes it up to 10 casualties. We'll now do the return fire by the Prussians in column there. This will be at -2 and then half effect against the skirmish screen. They roll a 7. So that takes them down to a 1, which is halved, is nothing. And then the Landwehr will do a volley against the French skirmishers, again at -2. That will be 6. Inferior volley. They're now recruits, so that is a loss of fire discipline. So they can't move unless or can't regain fire discipline unless they don't move next turn. And otherwise, that's it's now the artillery. So we'll do some long-range artillery fire for the Prussian batteries that pulled back, and they will have a go at this battalion here, as I think there's not sufficient distance between that unit and the Prussian opponents for the artillery to land successfully. So we will fire at 1 battery at this battalion and 1 battery at that battalion. So starting with the left-hand battalion, we roll a 7 at long range, is half a casualty, and then on the other battalion we roll a 10, which is much better. At long range, that is 2 casualties. So 1 casualty on this one, 2 casualties on this one. Essentially takes them up to 7. I've got my microphone cable tied up on a gun. All right, and then we've got a discipline test at -1 against this battalion. They go unformed, so that'll put a stymie on that French attack, possibly next turn. So good shooting by the Prussians. And then finally, the French batteries will open fire. Again at long range, will fire against the Landwehr column. Landwehr battalion in line. We roll a 9 and a 7. 7 at long range is half a casualty, and a 9 is 1. Let's see if the half converts. It does. That's 2 casualties on the Landwehr and a discipline test. That's a 4. That could be a retreat result. That would be bad news. Okay, so that artillery fire has been really effective, and unfortunately for the Prussians, that Landwehr battalion did fail its discipline test and has retreated off table. So that Landwehr brigade is now a broken brigade. So it looks like the French flanking attack, after all, might be successful. All right, let's do the hand-to-hand combat here as the Prussians try and charge into the village once again. Okay, so can the Prussians be as successful as the French were earlier in the game? They get 4 dice to 5. The French are unformed, but they do have engineers, so that'll take them on to 5 dice. The Prussians lose 1 for attacking a built-up area. And they do bad. They do 2 casualties. The French do 3. So the Prussians will consider whether they continue their assault. The French will stay in place. Okay, the Prussians chose to retire. They're on 6 casualties, so they'll be at -1 now. So they'll be on 4 dice. The French will still be on 5, and the French have this second battalion they could throw in with another 5 dice. So it'll be 10 dice to 4. That will be a suicide run for the Prussians. So, and because they don't have infantry assault off on that brigade, they can't throw any supports in. So that is it for that turn. All right, perhaps do one more turn. Let's roll for ADCs and see what we do. So once again, and pretty much for every turn of this game, which has certainly helped the Prussians a bit, the Prussians have initiative. So it'll be Prussian charges and then French charges to declare as we start turn 9. Okay, so no charges by the Prussians, as all their brigades are fairly precarious, and we could have another charge, I guess, by that battalion that just got thrown out of the village, but I can't see that it's going to get back in. And then the French are charging this turn. Their right-hand brigade has reformed, and 3 battalions are going in against the remaining Landwehr battalion. All right, let's do a defensive volley by the Landwehr. This will be at -1. That's 6. That goes down to a 5. For an inferior volley will be a loss of fire discipline. I think they previously had loss of fire discipline last turn, or if not them. Yeah, I think it was them, because they were firing at the skirmisher screen, which has moved out the way as the battalions charged. All right, so now a charge result for the Landwehr. Okay, so this is a +3 result for the French. The Prussian brigade is demoralised. The French are 1 morale grade higher, and the Prussians have more casualties than the French. So this will be a +3. French also get 2 rerolls, so the French will reroll that 1 onto a double 6. Not a natural double 6, but they win by 3. +3 is a win by 6. So victory, the defender is routed, takes an extra 1d6 casualties, and will disappear off the table. And that French brigade gets to charge on. Okay, so this is the way the game ends. We got to turn 9. We just did the final firing. The French skirmisher screen down here caused another 2 casualties and managed to drive off that Prussian battalion. Caused it to disintegrate as a result of taking 12 casualties. The garrisons and Saint-Armand have also caused another couple of casualties against these 2 attacking Prussian battalions. They're both up to 6 casualties now, as indeed are the Berg infantry, who are now under recurring artillery fire from the French artillery batteries here. This flanking Prussian brigade has driven off the Westphalian battalion. You saw them defeat them in the charge result. The charge on wasn't sufficient to take them into the flank or the side of, or indeed the front of that Berg battalion, so they simply reformed in place, recovered a casualty. So Saint-Armand is firmly in French hands. All the parts of the village are garrisoned, and the flanking unit has reached the Ligny stream and is in a position to cross, although the Prussian artillery has successfully withdrawn and will be able to inflict heavy casualties on the French if they try and advance any further, which is just what happened in the real battle. I hope you enjoyed that game. It's turned out really a smashing victory to the French here. There's very little left of the Prussian forces. They've lost 4 battalions. They had 7 battalions on the table against 6. But they had as much heavy artillery as the French, 2 batteries each. And I thought them being ensconced in all these built-up areas down here would allow them to hang on in there. But the fact that the Prussian reserves were released slowly, which meant their forces had to withdraw through the village and allow the French to build momentum up on the left, really helped, as did the French winning every single roll-off for battles for the village. And on every single one of those roll-offs, the Prussians actually had the advantage in the first round of combat. If they could have won half of those, they would have really slowed down and delayed this French attack and potentially got some retreat results and some falter tests to do on this left-hand brigade. As it was, we definitely suffered new model syndrome, and the redoubtable Swiss that we wanted to see on the table were the only French unit that was destroyed in this game. So here they are, the casualties of the game, sitting on the windowsill here. So no laurels for these guys today. But anyway, first time on the table for them, and hope you enjoyed the game. Cheers, everyone.